All right, welcome everyone to the Classy Career Girl podcast. I'm excited to introduce you to Lauren McGoodwin. Lauren founded Career Contessa in 2013 after experiencing a gap in career development resources for women who might be job searching, soul searching, leading, and managing, or trying to find new ways to advance within their careers. With women accounting for more than 50% of the workforce and the workforce being less defined than ever before, it seemed crazy to her and outdated that a resource for us just didn't exist. And formerly, Lauren was a university recruiter for Hulu, focusing on hiring, employer branding, and program management. So welcome, Lauren. I'm excited to have you here today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, we've both been building businesses in the same career niche for years. We've gone back and forth talking about connecting for a long time. So I'm excited that we finally get to do it here today.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's our favorite topic.
Yes, we can talk about this for days. So we'll try and keep it short. But I know I'm constantly sending women to your site. If you guys haven't checked out Career Contessa, it's a great website to check out. And I love that our listeners are going to be able to learn more from you today. So our two main focuses that we're going to talk about are salaries and resumes. Lauren knows a lot about both of those topics. So let's get started by just telling us a little bit more about why you started your company and why you're so obsessed like me about career development in women.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a horrible job right out of college. I graduated in 2009, not the best year to graduate or just be looking for a job for the first time ever anyways. But I graduated in 2009, ended up landing a job working for a major university, and I was an admin assistant inside one of their schools, and it was really just pretty miserable. I mean, I was really fortunate that I found a job, but I was, the fit of the job was really just not right. And I was there for almost 3 years. And in that 3 years, I did everything I could to try to figure out what is it that I want to do? How can I answer this question of what am I passionate about? And mind you, I had been the Career Center's poster child at university. And so I really felt like, a mix of shock, embarrassment, and just confusion this first few years that I was job searching. I randomly got assigned because somebody was out sick, because I was the admin assistant, so I never got to do anything cool, but I randomly got assigned to do some recruiting work. What universities do is they recruit local community colleges to transfer from a 2-year university to the 4-year university. So I had the best day of my life. I was on cloud 9. It was so much fun. I was talking to my parents, who were, very aware of the saga of my career at that time. And they both were like, well, what about recruiting as a career? And what's sort of shocking is I probably had spoken to dozens of recruiters at college career fairs and things like that, and never really connected the dots there. But the minute I learned about recruiting as a career option, I became obsessed with figuring out everything I could on what skills were required, what companies had recruiters, what did they do day to day. I reached out to about 70 for about 70 people on LinkedIn, so they were strangers, to have informational interviews. About 30 of them got back to me. So I want everyone to recognize that's
awesome.
Less than 50% success rate. But, on LinkedIn, they're strangers, and there were probably a lot of people that it's still sitting in their inbox unread. So I talked to these women who were amazing to give me 20 minutes of their time over the phone. And I learned everything I could about recruiting. And that's how I was able to convince Hulu to take a chance on me and hire me to be a part of their university recruiting team. And when I was at Hulu, that's when I really and I was on the other side of the hiring table. That's when really the spark for Career Contessa came about, because I had this horrific job. Now I was in a company that was an amazing fit. I was thriving at work. I was building confidence, and it was overflowing into my personal life as well. So I absolutely believe that having a job you love and you're fulfilled in makes a huge difference in all areas. And I was also I was at the point in my master's where we needed to write a thesis on something. So I chose to write my master's thesis on millennial women and career resources. So the whole idea for Career Contessa came out of all those personal experiences. And the master's thesis is where I was really pushed to actually create the prototype of what is Career Contessa. And essentially my thesis argued that the way millennial women especially were going to find careers was totally different than any other generation. And there needed to be a resource that could support them as they build careers on their own terms. And more women than any other generation are now working in the workforce, and they're going to be, some of them are the breadwinners in their families, et cetera, et cetera. So I became really passionate about Career Contessa from those experiences. Loved my job at Hulu, got to a place at Hulu where I was sort of ready to take the next steps. And we were going through a huge change at Hulu anyways. And I decided that this was the chance to go out on my own and try something. And I thank Hulu a lot, because not only did I gain confidence and skills and just a ton of experience, but I think also being part of a startup was where I kind of got this, caught the bug to become an entrepreneur, and really believed in myself to be able to launch this. So that is sort of the story of how I went from not knowing what I wanted to do to launching Career Contessa. And we've had it for about 4 years. And just, the journey into entrepreneurship is a whole other bag of tricks, but I'm very, very passionate about helping women build successful careers on their terms. And I think nothing can stop a determined woman. And I truly believe that.
I love it. I love it. So you're speaking my language for sure. And I'm so glad you brought up the informational interviews, because that's something that helped me too. And I think it's not many people talk about it, like exactly how they did it and how they went through. And then you get bummed because you send out 3 emails and no one responds back. And so just sharing your data, she emailed 70 people, she got 30 responses. So you have to be that determined woman and send out a lot of those messages, and you will get a response back.
I had an Excel sheet, and I would keep track of who I reached out to, who I followed up with, what they said on the call. I mean, it was like my pride and joy was this Excel sheet. And I think if you're unhappy in your job, if you want to give yourself an instant pickup, it's start reaching out and having those informational interviews, because nothing made me feel more jazzed or more full of hope than having those informational interviews and recognizing that I actually had control of that. I don't always have a lot of control over whether they respond to my resume when I apply to a job, for example, but you have full control over reaching out to people. And if they don't follow up, move on, reach out to another person.
And I bet it raised your confidence level too. And that's why you were able to convince Hulu to hire you too, because you had built up that confidence talking to those 30 other recruiters.
Yeah. And I really think I learned how to speak the language. They were, after 30 calls with recruiters, a lot of them would talk about the same type of things, and they would talk about applicant tracking systems. And there was just a language that they were speaking that there's no way I would have been able to talk about had I not had those informational interviews. Also, I know for a fact that it really, really impressed Hulu, and it was where it was down between me in the recruiting process. It was between me and this other girl who had been a recruiter at a studio here in LA. And they gave me the chance because I had shown how much interest I had by having those informational interviews. So if you do that kind of research and you put in that time and effort, make sure that you humble brag about it in your interview process, because I know for a fact that made a huge difference.
That's awesome. So the other big thing I want to talk about is I've been seeing this salary project on your website. I've been seeing a lot of stuff about it. I want to know what this is and why, salary transparency is so important.
Yes. Well, the Salary Project is an anonymous salary database that is crowdsourced from anybody and everyone. So our readers anonymously submit their salary information, and in part 1, they give us a little bit of information, and we will give them a personalized salary report. If they give us a little bit more information, then we'll give them access to our entire database. It's amazing because there's no salary database out there, at least I haven't been able to find one, where they will literally let you dig through the data. Almost all of them will give you a chart and show how you compare to other things, but they won't just say, hey, have some fun, check out the numbers, see where people are located, what they make, their age, that kind of thing. And so I truly believe that knowledge is power, and having the insight into what people make can really help, it can help shape the questions you ask. It can help shape the actions you take. And maybe you were never considering a career in nonprofits, even though you loved it because you didn't think you'd get paid enough. And now you've just been proven that there's actually a ton of people out there that make 6 figures and work for nonprofits. So I think that is all great stuff. So, and it's completely free. And this was a tool that was inspired by an editorial piece that we were creating. And when we realized how powerful this tool could be, we said, okay, we need to actually collect this data and report the data in a really professional way. We were using like a Google form before. So now people, when they log in and they get this information, they create an account so they can update their account so we can actually see their salary story throughout the years if we wanted to. So anyway, long story short is that it's an amazing tool and it's now legit compared to before. And I'm actually really passionate about salary transparency for a few reasons. One, I think equality in the workforce can't happen without transparency. And we're at a time in our lives where transparency is more expected. We don't want to work for companies that are terrible to the environment or, don't like the transparency piece, the social impact piece of company. Like there's so many, the expectations are a lot higher. So I think equality in the workforce I think salary transparency can help with that. Salary transparency, by the way, is not companies, printing out the name and the salary of every employee and tacking it to the wall. That's not the way of doing it. But there could be a lot more transparency around how they determine salary basis, how they determine how much they add in for experience or location, or, how do they come up with those measures to set that salary. So I think that's a great thing. If you want to have equality, you've got to have some transparency. I also think that salary transparency starts to create environments of trust. When you don't think that your employer is paying you less than the guy next to you just because they can get away with it, you are going to trust that your employer has your back. You're going to trust that they want the best for you, and you probably aren't going to look around for a new job right away. So it actually could help companies a lot. And again, going back to some of the recent things that have been happening in the workplace, trust is not something that a lot of employees have with their employers. So those are just a few of the reasons why I think salary transparency is actually hugely beneficial. Of course, there are scenarios where it can go wrong, but that's why I say salary transparency done in a responsible way can I think really move the needle.
It's so important, like right when you start a job. And I remember I worked for a company for 8 years, and that first salary I got, every raise is based off that first salary. And so like, I always think back to like, what if I would have, asked for a higher salary in the beginning? Like where would my end pay have been 8 years down the line? And so that's why I think this is so great, is because that very beginning, like go check like the average salaries before you start a new job. Please, whatever you do, you have to do this research.
Absolutely. And, the goal of the salary project is to provide you information and maybe, light a fire under your butt to go out there and have conversations with real people who work at your company or are in your industry or in your location, to ask them what they make. I would never encourage someone to just use the salary project as their only base for justifying a raise or their salary request, right? But I do think you can do some research, and you can use that research to inspire you to then go talk to real people. And between all of that types of research, you can come out with a really realistic salary range that is well within the value of what your skills are worth, and totally within the range of what is fair. So you, like you said, you're not starting out your salary much lower and then having to fight for every raise to get to the top after that. I mean, that's just exhausting.
Exactly. Yeah. And you feel more confident when you're asking too. And it goes back to the informational interviews when we talked about that in the beginning. This is something you could talk about during those informational interviews too, right? You could ask, what's the typical range for a recruiter, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, not everybody's going to be comfortable answering that question. That's okay. But the beauty is that there are plenty of people who are doing the same jobs out there. So if one person says no, say, all right, thanks. That's totally okay. And go ask the next person, hey, what do you think is an appropriate range? Or what's the range for what your role makes? I never ask people to give me the exact number. I think that's just one, you don't need the exact number. That's not the point.
Right. Exactly. And I know you're a recruiter, and what I've heard from recruiters is like, you have to be ready to tell them what your expected salary is. And
absolutely.
I had a friend who was a recruiter, and she said some people kind of shy away from it. And she would get so frustrated because she needed to know that number. And so you have to, you have to be prepared. So do you have any like tips for negotiating your salary, or, right in the beginning, asking for a raise?
So if you're interviewing for a job, of course, we just talked about it, but know what your range is and have a way, if they say, oh, how did you come up with that number? Make sure that you can answer that. If they say, okay, that's a little bit higher than we'd like to go, but let's continue the interview process. I mean, that is why we ask the salary up front, is we don't want to waste your time or our time interviewing someone for a job that we're like, we know for a fact that our numbers are so far apart, you probably won't consider us. So let's say they say, that's at the top of our range, but I think we can continue having the interview process. Now you get to the interview offer stage and they give you an offer that's $10,000 less. Now you can say to them, look, when we originally talked, I told you this was my range. And I told you why this was my range. And, it looks like we're $10,000 apart. Would you consider this number? And I would pick the number that's still near, like, let's say you said between 80 and 85,000 and they give you an offer at 70,000. I would come back and say, would you consider 82,000? So you've given a little bit, but you're still picking a number that has an 8 in front of it, which then says to them like, hey, don't come back unless there's an 8 in front of it. And if they say, look, we really, really want you, we can't do 80. Could you take 77 and another or 2 extra weeks of vacation and something else, then you get to go back and consider it. So the other thing that's really important to know is what are the factors or your biggest priorities when it comes to accepting a job? Maybe it's being able to work from home every Friday. Maybe it's that extra week of vacation. Maybe it's, they give you some other perk that you'd really like to have. So know what those priorities are so that you can think about your whole compensation package as a package and negotiate based off of that. But I also learned really quickly that in negotiations, one of the worst things you can do is sort of talk yourself to death or talk in circles. So I've really learned how to, and even like when we work with brand partners, we'll throw out the number that we want, and then it's just, I remain quiet. And I think that is really, really powerful, because oftentimes when people are talking about money, they get uncomfortable and it's like, they talk and talk and talk and talk. Just throw out your number. Would you consider XYZ? And let them talk. Leave it. Be okay with that awkward silence, or be okay with them saying, let me get back to you. And don't ever quit your other job until you have an offer in hand and it's signed by both parties, because you don't want them to have any leverage. Like, now that you've quit your job, you have to come here. And maybe that's another thing you negotiate, a sign-on bonus. There are so many pieces of negotiation, and the whole idea is that in the negotiation, both parties feel like they win.
I love it. And I love to, overall, it's okay to negotiate. I admit I did not negotiate my very first out of college job, and so I think overall, that's important. You as a recruiter expect them to negotiate that, correct?
Yeah. I mean, we pretty much always expect everyone to negotiate. There are plenty of companies, I think, that hate negotiations. So they will tell you, we don't negotiate. We come out with our best offer. Here's the offer. There's no negotiation. If someone says that, you have to decide if that's the kind of company you want to work for. Also, if you threw out, again, 85,000, they say, we don't negotiate, here's 70,000. I mean, I would say this is what it's going to be like every time you ask for a raise or every time you ask for a promotion. If you want to work for a company like that, then you need to figure out, okay, there's no room to negotiate on the salary piece of this, but what else can we negotiate on? What other pieces could you offer me instead if the compensation is lower? So I always say, companies will tell you a lot about their culture in the interview process as well. And that's something you have to think about. I always loved that there were plenty of times where we didn't negotiate, because I felt like it showed you, hey, we come out with our best offer. We don't try to lowball you and then get up, 10,000. That, but we were never so far apart that somebody was, not believing that we really were making our best offer. So you learn a lot about a company in that process as well.
Exactly. So the other thing I want to talk about is resumes. And I know you have a lot of tips from this. You have a whole course on resumes. From a recruiter perspective, how we all know, you should know you'll have about 6 seconds or less, right? And you have a very short time frame to have your resume noticed and stand out. So what's your biggest tip on how to get your resume to stand out for a recruiter?
So my best tip is make your resume something that I want to read. Make it look nice. Make it organized, make it easy for me to find what I'm looking for. So many people put in minimal effort when it comes to their resume. It's Times New Roman, black, size 11 or 12 font. I mean, the really bad ones are size 8. I can't read that even if I had glasses on, and those are the majority of the resumes that come through in the resume piles. I think people are getting a little bit better, but think about your favorite brand on Instagram that you follow. They probably have put in some effort into making their feed be something that looks that's eye-pleasing, it's cohesive, it's got, certain colors that they use consistently, whatever it is. Think of your resume the same way. You want to make this document something that's exciting to check out and easy to find. We do have a resume course, and we actually have created 5 resume templates. And these 5 resume templates, they're all designed so that you don't have to worry about that pesky Microsoft Word line that you can never remove. So you could use a tool like that. The Etsy has some resume templates. You can create your own. Microsoft Word has resume templates now. But what I have found is that start by picking a really great template that's a great fit for your industry and the company that you're applying for. You probably don't need to throw around a lot of colors if you're applying to a more corporate role, obviously. But start there. And then my next tip is, when you are filling out your resume, remember that this is a snapshot of the most relevant experience that you have, or the experience that's most relevant to the job and company that you're applying for, not your whole life story. I hated 2-page resumes, mostly because a lot of times I was looking at them as PDFs on the computer, and so I'd have to scroll a couple of pages. Not until later on would I actually print out resumes. So it wasn't, the easier I could scroll through it, then if I liked it, I would then print it out. So that was my style. There's also, you want to make sure that you have certain keywords on your resume for anybody who is using online systems that are sorting through the resumes for them. A lot of companies do have things like that, but that's why my other tip is to do your best to make sure your resume goes directly to a real person as well.
Tell us more about that. So the online application, someone submits an online application, what would you recommend? Would you recommend them following up with a recruiter too?
Yep, absolutely. Even if you follow up with the wrong recruiter. So this is a true story from Hulu. I sent my resume actually to the director of communications, which if you had met this person, I had no right sending her an email ever in my life, let alone my resume to interview for the university recruiting coordinator position. But you know what? She forwarded it to the recruiter, and that's how it got in his hands. So I would encourage you to do some research on who are the recruiters, how does the company set up their email addresses, and send it to them directly. Sometimes you can guess. Sometimes you could also just say recruiting@thecompanyname.com. But do your best to see if you can get it in the inbox of a real person as best you can.
And I think overall too, I imagine that you weren't applying to a ton of different companies. You really wanted to work at Hulu. Am I right?
Oh yeah.
So
absolutely.
you were targeting in, and I think that's important too, because we've seen a lot of job searchers who are just applying everywhere with the same resume. And so tell us about do you think it's good to target in?
Absolutely. I actually have an entire online course all about target companies. And I think target companies is really your secret to job search success. We have a saying in recruiting called spray and pray, where you spray your resume everywhere and you pray that someone will pick it up. We will not pick it up. There's nothing more frustrating than somebody who applies to every job at every company and thinks they're great. Pick a lane and stay in your lane. And yes, find 5 companies that you are absolutely passionate and thrilled about. You love their product. You are have been a user. You think their CEO is the next greatest thing in the world. Whatever it is, pick 5 target companies and go after those jobs that are at that company, because you want to have a consistent story, and it will make your job search more focused. And I think everyone can appreciate being more focused with their job search.
And then you can spend more time networking too, and finding those emails and those people that you should be following up with after you submit your application online too. I know a lot of people don't like online applications. So as soon as you can get to a real person, it's oh, this can be more fun.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
What about like accomplishments too? Like, do you talk about that, how important that is?
Yes, absolutely. So I am a fan of resumes. Let's say you've worked at the same company for 10 years. Please don't give me 15 bullet points. Create subheadings or give me some bullet points and then have another heading that says key achievements, and tell me what you've done. What were your key achievements? And if you don't know what your key achievements are over the last 10 years, then you need to sit down, you need to think about what those are, because if you haven't had any, which is impossible, you definitely had some. When I was an admin assistant, one of my key achievements was that I never responded to an email or phone message in less than 24 hours during the workday. So I would show off the fact that I was really efficient with my role, right? And so when people come to me and they say, I've done nothing, I'm just an admin assistant, I'm like, well, I was an admin assistant too. You can absolutely spin this, and you probably are getting a lot done. I mean,
admin assistants are awesome.
Yeah, let's be honest. The office does not run without us there. So, and I really truly believe if you know what your end goal is, you can work backwards from there and get there in a much quicker way. And so yes, I 100% agree with everything you're saying with that. Like, pick something, stay in your lane. Let's start with that.
So the last question I want to ask you is like, what is like one action that if someone's job searching right now that they can take from this interview? They're feeling stuck. They have no idea what step to take next. Like, what is something that they can do when they get off listening to this right now and go do?
Yeah, they can make a list of target companies and then start reaching out to one person in each of those companies to have an informational interview. And your learning goal of that informational interview can be just to learn more about what is the company culture like. Why does that person like working there? What made them pick that company? So at that rate, you're not even looking for a job. You're just looking to learn more about the ins and outs of the company.
Love that. Yes. Huge fan of informational interviews here. I had an interview. My first one was with a lawyer because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And I realized in that informational interview, I do not want to be a lawyer. So a success story right here. I know.
Yeah, and knowing what you don't want to do is actually sometimes easier than figuring out what you do want to do. So when you are having those informational interviews and you are weeding out the things you don't want to do, don't see that as a negative. See that as a positive. I mean, if you hadn't done that, you might have spent
a lot of money
of your life and a lot of money pursuing a legal career.
Yeah, I know. I always think about that. So where can people find out more about you, the salary project we talked about, and everything about Career Contessa?
So our website is www.careercontessa.com. On the right-hand side, you'll see in Coral, it says the salary project. Go ahead and click on that. So that's how you can get to all of our content, our online courses, our career coaching service, the salary project. We are at Career Contessa on every single social platform you can think of. And then I am just at Lauren McGoodwin on Instagram. And that's pretty much the only channel I can handle these days. So yeah, the people can reach us those ways.
And if you're on Pinterest, make sure you follow Career Contessa because they've got a lot of stuff to add to your boards.
Yes,
I think that's where I first found out about Career Contessa too.
Yeah, we're trying to make career content cool.
Yeah.
as best we can. So we've got a pretty active Pinterest, Instagram, like all the places where you're like, oh, this isn't super visual. There's no way they could be there. Nope, we're there.
I love it. And then did you say the link to your salary project too?
Yeah, so it's just careercontessa.com/the-salary-project/splash.
Okay, and it's on the homepage too, I think.
Yep, exactly.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Lauren, for sharing so much with us today. This was a fun time to connect with you. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.